Cool. All right, so fun stuff. 6 steps to building a SaaS trial that converts. 1 is setting clear goals. Knowing upfront what your success criteria are going to be, both for your user and for your business. 2 is identifying those key behaviors. You could call this an optional step, and often if you're starting building for the first time, you may or may not need to be event-based, but as you get into a V2 of your trial, then identifying the key behaviors that you want users to achieve during the course of a trial to recognize value. 3rd is define the obstacles and nudges that you need to provide. So what are the key hurdles that people have as they go through a buying process? And how can you help affect that and nudge them to become more successful? 4 is actually building the journey. 5 is creating some great content that meets their needs at the right point in time. And then 6 is measuring success. So we'll start off with setting conversion goals. So, a key element here is you need to be able to do this and actually have a framework to track both signups, those who become active, and those who convert. And also doing so on a cohort basis. So that means being able to attribute activations and purchases back to when they signed up, which means that you're actually reflecting the in-product experiences and the marketing that person went through as they experienced and trialed your product, and you can attribute that back appropriately. So some benchmarks, less than 10% cohort basis conversion, and I'll talk a little bit more about in a second about what time frames, but less than about 10% average is standard, with up close to 10 being good. 10 to 15% is very good, and then 15% plus is usually pretty much best in class, and takes quite a long time for companies to rev up to that point. And there's obviously ones where they're much higher than that. There's those that are much lower. These are sort of rough ballparks that repeatedly come up over and over. Key elements to think about is, 1, your conversion by channel. So companies will sometimes have an online or self-service business and then sales teams who engage. The other factor is whether or not this is occurring within a frequency of time. So some companies, if you're in a freemium application or you have a time-independent approach, then you might be very concerned about how many people get active in the first day they sign up, for example. So those are sort of key points to think about. These are raw numbers. So by 10%, I'm talking like raw signups to converted customers. A lot of times we'll use lead scoring or different approaches to marketing qualify leads before they go into this funnel, and of course that's going to start to drive up those rates. Now the second key thing is identifying those key behaviors or thresholds that users need to experience, and that that those who do so are going to be successful. For example, in Autopilot we might look at things like whether or not you've published a journey or added a tracking. We all have key events we want to move towards. So really mapping those out. Secondly, and in our store, and so some common examples would be logging in. So just frequency of login, specific actions like I just mentioned. 3rd would be usage thresholds, like what's the one key thing that everybody needs to be doing to be successful in your app. Maybe it's committing code, and you find that 30% of people commit at a certain level or above, and that's what you define as an activated trial. And 4th is non-app event. Sometimes you'll have a required step to review your account configuration with a data specialist or an account manager. Those can also be key events. The key thing being, you want to get people to the point where about 1/3 of people are getting really active and converting at a 3x higher rate as a good benchmark for an activated person. So the third most important is, and this is a pretty heavy looking slide, so just speaking at a high level, most trials will include some or all of these different types of messages. A welcome, so welcome to your company, to your service. Usage tips, so consider ways in which you can become more successful in the application. Sales touches, so these would be outreach emails coming from sales or success members. Usage review, a really highly successful email, and I'll show some examples in a second, that comes mid-trial that you can use to sort of reward and motivate power users as well as help non-users recognize the opportunities. Expiry warnings, we've all seen those, you're coming close to the end. And then feedback emails, which are a really effective way at the end of a trial to help understand why maybe people didn't convert. So in each of these, and I don't want to go into all of this right now, but we will share this afterwards. But in each of these areas, you want to identify a need. So for the welcome, maybe a 1, 2, 3 approach. What's the 1, 2, 3 things you want to do? Being prescriptive. We find that being prescriptive and very clear with customers around what you need to do to become successful has a pretty high impact on whether or not they achieve that. The goal is to help them log in and start using the service. You obviously want to do that immediately, potentially doing that in an HTML formatted, branded from your company, but in a very clear manner. We've even thrown in here the concept of tone, right? So that's something you might want to map out in advance. Sometimes being funny there, using some humor, joking about yourself in a self-deprecating manner can be a good way to sort of stand out in that intro. Same thing, usage tips. The need of the customers, they want to be successful in app. The goal of the company, of course, is to drive usage. You want to do that pretty early on. Sometimes mixing up channels, using an email as well as an in-app message, for example. With an Autopilot, we call it heads-up messages, can be a really great way to drive usage, especially when personalized to those power users versus the non-power users, to help them in different manners, which we'll go into. Sales touches, this is a desire. So many customers have a desire for a direct point of contact, hand-holding during the course of the trial. The goal of the company is to help them schedule or engage without having to manually send emails to every single person. And again, you typically want to do an introduction for those for the segment of accounts or trials that are actually qualified for sales or ready for sales, doing that quickly. Fourth is the usage review, and the fifth. So I'm going to skip through this, and I'm going to give you some examples, which is a little more exciting way to look at it than that table there. But we will share this afterwards so you can take a look. So the fourth is to actually build your journey. So here are 3 common types of trials. Option 1 is time-based, not without usage, right? So this is simply welcome, send a series of emails during the course of that trial, for example, through day 30. It's the same message to everybody, tactfully done according to those messaging guidelines. It's a way to set a drumbeat and help people on a path to success. It's often a good place to start, get some baseline data in place, get a baseline experience. What you'll typically then see is moving into like a V2 of the experience, although some people come on board right off the bat knowing exactly what they want, and that is to start to bring in usage-based personalization. They've achieved that key event or threshold or they haven't, speaking differently to there. We use event checks and then speak differently. And what you see is it's more effort, more time, but definitely better results in terms of engagement rates and typically conversion rates. And a third type of approach is a freemium type offering that's purely usage-based, so positive or negative rewards and messaging based on what they've achieved within the app, because obviously there's not necessarily a time frame, although most freemium apps do have a goal within the first 24 hours or within the first 7 days to get people to a certain point. Dropbox, Mixpanel being good examples of that. Today we're with Lunchbox, our big competitor to Dropbox. We're going to go and build out option 2 shortly here. So I mentioned I skipped through that table because I want to show a quick couple of examples of content that we've sourced from out across the web and think are particularly useful and insightful. So one is the Goodreads. The objective of this service is to help users become better readers, right? And they gave a 1, 2, 3 path: favorite your follow author, join a group, win a free book. Their service is appealing to the user and how you can do better at that. There's also Squarespace, speaking to a more of an operational or technical audience. Their objective is clarity. Here are your details, welcome, your login, your username. Here's how do you access your account settings. And they're also bringing across their human-centric values at Squarespace with the real photos of their employees and staff. Usage tips. Here's a great one. Paperless Post. They target new users who have not yet taken their first action. And in this case, it's about send your mom a card, right? And they want you to experience the satisfaction of getting good feedback from your mom after she's received like an awesome card that is very different to other types of services. I actually used Paperless Post for my wedding, and it was awesome. Didn't have to send mailings all over the world a few years ago, and Paperless Post was early back then, so pretty happy I did that. And so one thing they've done is they've eliminated unnecessary text. That line is targeted to somebody who's not yet done that for the first time. And those other examples could be the opposite almost, like no images, could be text-based, but what they would share is a common purpose, which is to provide a compelling reason for a new user to take a certain action and sort of get a response. A third type of message is in-app messages we call heads-up messages. And we've stolen the example of Instapage here, who went on record and said that since they put in place a welcome from their CEO when you sign up for the service, they've had a 30% increase in the number of people who attend their weekly group demos, which is pretty remarkable. We actually use this internally, and it works really well for us. Common examples here can be invites to webinars like this from a high-profile person in your organization, linking to key content. Say if somebody hasn't mailed that email, that letter to their mom, you could pop it up saying, didn't you want to send a message to your mom? For asking for feedback or subscribing, for example, to in-product updates, common use cases for in-app messages. Fourth is a mid-trial or an account usage review. This really came from Salesforce that did this first in the industry back probably about 10 years ago now. They gave you your personalized account review and they showed all the features in your platform and what you have and haven't used. And it was a great way to sort of be like, oh, I need to go and set up, pipeline forecasting. Zendesk has sort of taken this to the next level by merging their product, their benchmarking product, which provides benchmark performance across industries, use cases, and segments, and actually merging that into their account review emails. And embedding this within your trial is a great way to both assist new trialists on how they're performing against others, and as well, it's a very tactful nudge that helps them get another touch point with your company during the course of that trial, and offering a lot of value there. It builds trust in your business. These tend to be one of the highest performing. So fifth is the expiry warnings. We all know these. Really the goal here is, you got 1 week left to go. Dropbox kind of does a good job of this with their Dropbox for Business product, which is time-based, where the goal is for motivated users who do plan to buy to make sure they don't have any service interruptions. So make sure they get their ducks in line while bumping up the priority for those who are still on the fence and still evaluating. So, Dropbox uses humor and their iconic sort of hand-drawing images to capture your attention, give you very clear, minimal points of what you need to do to get going here, and provide a next step to help you with that. And the last one we mentioned here is a feedback survey, another fantastic and little used tactic for, at the end of a trial experience, for those who didn't purchase, to say, will you share why you didn't convert or what we can do to improve? It's a way in which you can, A, have a passive collector of data that shows you, again, ways to improve your product and your service. And secondly, it gives you a way to tactfully nudge people who are still interested, but maybe simply just push this out to sort of re-engage when they think they're about to lose out on the opportunity. For example, in the one we do at Autopilot, we find that the number one reason why people don't buy at the end of a trial, 27%, is they're still actually evaluating, they just haven't made a decision yet. And this often, in us asking them for feedback, is a way in which we sort of re-incite them back in again. So without further ado, we're going to move out of slides and into actually doing a build out for Lunchbox.